Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm taking a look at the iFlight Cinebee. This is a 75mm Cinewhoop. So a Cinewhoop is a relatively small model that vaguely resembles a tiny whoop, but it has to be a little bit bigger because it's to house a HD and FPV camera all in one system, this one being the Cadex Turtle V2. And iFlight has realized that these things are really just for cruising. I mean, when I look at the other ones that I have checked out, so we've got the Mobula 7 HD, we've got the Tiny Leader HD, and also the Beta FPV 85X. So all of these come into that category. However, when you start throwing acro maneuvers at them after some time, or maybe it's straight away, they start behaving differently to your usual acro freestyle model. You get what is called yaw washouts, where the model will just all of a sudden not have enough power and sort of yaw that way, or it might pitch backwards slightly as well. And I was trying to ponder last week with this one why that is, and between myself and my friend NJ Tech, we sort of came to the conclusion that there is not enough power to recover from these maneuvers, and that is why it happens. Basically, it becomes a stall. But then I was thinking, hang on a minute, as I was watching my video of this guy back, I said that it is lighter than your usual 2-inch setup, and it is. So if it's lighter than your usual 2-inch setup, then why on a 3-cell battery is it still doing these strange maneuvers? So I do think actually that the duct or protectors have a part to play in it, because what we have got here is a disruption to the airflow as well as the model being heavy. And I was thinking, why does the Tiny Hawk fly so good? And if you look at that one, it has done the opposite. So we actually have no airflow disrupted underneath here. Instead, the airflow is disrupted on the intake, which isn't as bad as on the outtake, it seems. And this guy's a lot lighter as well. So I think it's a combination of these things being too heavy, but also really the only way to fix that is just to have way too much power so that it sort of blasts through this disrupted airflow. And that's what my friend NJ Tech found. He put up a 4S battery on this guy, even though they said not to, and he wasn't getting any of the washout maneuvers whatsoever. But as I say, I think iFlight have just given up on that idea because people are not using them for acro anyways. Instead, what it seems is they are doing these really smooth and slow flying videos. They are going through gaps and even sometimes reversing the entire video, so you get quite a strange perspective of the model flying backwards even though it was flown forward. And I think with this guy it is definitely going to be just a cruiser, because even though it's a 75mm model, so the same size as the Tiny Leader HD and the same size as the Mobula 7 HD, this one weighs 46 grams. This one weighs about 56 grams, but this one weighs 70 grams like this, which is just 5 grams less than the 85X, and this is an 85mm 2-inch propeller against a 1.6-inch propeller. And if this model was doing a couple of its yaw washout maneuvers towards the end of its battery with its 2-inch setup, then this guy, being heavy with the smaller props, is definitely going to do that when you put it into acro. So iFlight, I think, have just said, no, this is what a Cinewhoop is. It is for flying slow and not doing acro, so why don't we go all out and make it a bit heavier so that we can top mount the battery, more sort of like a freestyle kind of setup, even though it's not going to do acro. So the frame is made up of a 1mm thick carbon fibre top plate, which is for your Lipo to sit on, and then we've got a battery strap here which is made out of Velcro, and it's a more traditional frame in that we then have got some standoffs here, so two at the front and one at the back, and that connects to a 1mm thick carbon fiber bottom plate, so I think that is where the weight is coming from. That, and we've also got some TPU printed parts for the antennas and things like that, and also the camera, but more on that later. And you can see it's almost like how the Tiny Leader HD did it, however they went with a TPU mount for the top instead of carbon fiber, so this one was a little bit heavier as well. And you can see the format is very similar. It's in that dead cat configuration, so that the back two motors are slightly closer together than the front two, and that is usually done to get the props out of shot, so I don't think we're going to get any props in shot. Whereas if you look at the True X style, then you have more of a chance of getting the ducts in shot, which actually I did with this particular model. Then the protectors connect underneath to the carbon fiber part of the frame, just using two screws. And if you buy directly through iFlight, you can buy some spares or have it as an optional extra, as also many other optional extras. For example, this didn't come with a Lipo, but I think you can get it with a Lipo sent to you. So you can't use the model without the protectors, because as you can see the motors are connected directly, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But underneath we have got this plastic plate here, and this is housing the Cadets Turtle V2. As I say, it's quite unusual, but I guess they ran out of space because they're using a traditional stack. One thing that's really cool about this is that the Cadets Turtle doesn't have a protector for the micro SD card, so they've made one with their plastic bottom plate, which I think is a nice touch. However, there is no way to get to the stop and start record button, but it has come set up with the auto record on, and when you pull the battery it does save the footage. You do lose the last couple of seconds of your video, but usually the last couple of seconds of my video is me retrieving the copter, so you don't really lose anything. You can see that we have got the little connector poking out of the back. You kind of have to get some tweezers to get to that, and for some reason they haven't provided the little Cadex controller board. Now I can see why they have done that, maybe to cut costs. However, this one came set up in a 16:9 mode, and I'm using 4:3 goggles, and it's not very nice to fly like that, so it would have been nice, especially for the price, to get one of these, and especially as they've left the connector out of the back for you there as well. But otherwise every other setting was set nicely, so it was set to 1080p 60, auto record on, as I say, and it's set to NTSC, so everything was fine there, just apart from the aspect ratio. I suppose if you wanted to, you could drill a hole in the side of this plastic plate here to access the stop and start record button, because if I've had a particularly good flight and I just pull a battery, there's always in the back of my mind the thought, did that actually record and did it save a file? But in my experience it always does. Onto the motors, and they are an iFlight branded 1103 2 to 3S brushless motor with a naked bottom. So even though this stack that they have put in here can take a 4S Lipo, the motors can't. They also don't really recommend a battery for it either, so I think I'm going to try this 450 milliamp 3S Tattoo battery that I tried with the Beta FPV 85X. I think it would be just a little bit too gutless on a 2S, and also if you went light on the 2S then you could probably get enough power, but you would get like a sub 2-minute flight time. So I'm going for a long flight time and just smooth straightforward flying with this guy. So onto the props, and these are the Gemfan 1635. Now they have also provided some HQ propellers in the box, and the reason for that is, I believe from what I have read from other people experiencing this model, is that the Gemfan props are more durable. However, you do get jello in bright sunshine when using this prop, so that's why they provided the HQ prop, which is a 4-blade, but these aren't durable and they break really easy. In fact, they look like something from an Airfix model, so I can see that they are really brittle straight away. So the stack is iFlight's own success, 16 by 16 size stack. So the ESCs are a 12 amp. And they are a BL Halley S, not BL Halley 32, and we've got an XT30 connector coming out of the back. Then above that we've got their own F4 flight controller with Betaflight version 3.50 and Betaflight on-screen display, and above that we have got their own VTX, which switches up to 200 milliwatt. It's using a micro UFL connector, and the antenna is a linear one. It just comes out of the back there. This is the RXSR version, and it's available with many different receivers, so I'll put a link to that in the below so you can check out the different receiver options. And we've got, as I mentioned, the antennas already set up, so that's quite a nice touch, and it's really easy to get to as well. The VTX is also switchable by smart audio. Also in the box we have got some stickers, but there is no manual. And we have got 4 of these stickers missing. That's because they are wrapped around the protectors, so I guess these are spare ones for that. They also do a black version of this. I'd recommend getting that one, because if you are flying around grass and these props are chopping up the grass, then these ducks are going to turn a greeny brown very quickly, so I'd go for that version myself. Now it's worth mentioning that the Cadex Turtle V2 camera is different on this Cinewhoop compared to all of the others that I have checked out, because it's got the new glass lens with a built-in ND filter. I do think they have done it a slight injustice though by still mounting it using 3D printed TPU parts. The Tiny Leader HD in bright sunlight gets Jallo, and I think despite all of the efforts that they have gone to surround this thing with carbon, mounting it in TPU in bright sunlight is still going to produce Jallo, I believe. Now that might be quite difficult for me to show, because it's difficult to find bright sunlight in the UK at this time of year. In fact, it's quite difficult sometimes in the summer, but I'll see how I get on with it. Okay, so let's see what's happening in Betaflight. So I've got the Copter connected to the USB port on the computer. So if we go into the ports tab, we've got the IRC Tramp on the UART1, then we've got the Serial RX on the UART2, so no spare UARTs there. Let's go into configuration. So we've got D-Shot 600 and motor stop is off. The motor idle is set to 9. That's actually higher than I usually set it. I usually set it to about 6, but maybe they believe that it needs to be that. Maybe they've actually kept that to try and make it fly smoother at lower throttles, or maybe when it's recovering from a lower throttle, should I say. Interesting that it's just got 8K, 2K for the PID loop, but I guess we're not going to be doing much acro with this guy, so it doesn't really matter. And it's got barometer enabled, but we're not going to be using that. Oh, it's got the arming angle set to 180, which is what I usually set it at, so that's pretty cool. We've got personalization as Cinebee, and what else have we got? So Serial RX and S-Bus. That's all set up correctly for the RXSR. This is interesting though, look at this. Telemetry is turned off, so I can still do my RSSI through one of the aux channels. So we've got air mode permanently on, which is how I would have it, on-screen display, and we've got no ESC telemetry, so that's turned off. Anti-gravity and dynamic filter, and we've got RX loss and RX set because we don't have a onboard beeper, so it's going to be using D-Shot commands. So yeah, that's not too bad. Shame about the telemetry. So let's do a save and reboot and connect back to it. So power and battery, I always like to stick this at around about 2.9 to 3. I'll go for 2.9 just because these are the warnings that are going to come up in your on-screen display, and they start flashing and they can be a pain. Sometimes go 4.6 if I want to use a high volt Lipo, however I don't think I'm going to be using a high volt here. So we don't have a current meter with this guy either. So PID tuning, let's take a look. So are those custom PIDs on 350? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna leave them. I am going to up the rate a little bit though to about 1000. I know this is meant to be smooth, but depending whether we can do acro or not, that's not really going to make too much of a difference. And I'm also going to put around about 15 of RC Expo in there, and I'll also stick it on there as well for my shaky hands. So what have we got down here? Nothing else other than item rotation. It's not using VBAT PID compensation. They've basically given up on the PIDs, haven't they, and said this is a slow flyer. They haven't put any settings in there. We don't have any TPA or anything like that, so I think I'm going to leave that as such. So in the receiver tab, so I'm going to be using the Tyrannus. It's set up as TAER1234, same as my Tyrannus. I am going to add RSSI. I should be able to do that through the auxiliary 4, I think it would be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to do that on channel 8 on the auxiliary 4, and that is done through the transmitter, because even though telemetry might not be hooked up, RSSI always feeds through to the Tyrannus, therefore you can send it back as a PWM value to the flight controller through an aux channel. So if you want to know how to do that, check out my Flex RC Komori build. I go through how to do that in detail, but I won't in this video. I'm also going to add around about 5 of RC deadband, just so that it doesn't drift around in the center of the sticks. So I will save that. Then onto the modes tabs. Oh, it's actually set up pretty nicely. I'm just going to stretch my arming to up there on the aux 1. Angle I would have in there anyways, and I take horizon out. And have we got anything else? No, so I would add a beeper for the aux 3. I'll just stick that over there. And you could do turtle mode if you want, but I'm not going to bother. So you would do that there. So save that. And if we go into the on-screen display, what have we got? So we've got warnings. Those kind of annoying. They can be useful, like if your copter's not arming, then it might tell you something like MSP or something like that. It's usually because it's plugged into Betaflight or whatever, and it'll tell you the warning there. You can see all the warnings here, so arming disabled, battery not full, battery warnings, you know, all of these types of things. I guess you might find them useful, but I never have. And I'm going to just lower these down one as well, because that means these are going to be slightly higher. So that's your throttle value. Don't really need that, but VTX channel I like, and we've also got the Copter name up there. I'm just going to add RSSI up the top there somewhere, because I'm going to add that with the RXSR. I think they could have done that really, but you know, they haven't. So it's up to you whether you enable RSSI on the RXSR, so I guess that's up to you. However, they could have hooked telemetry up. So yeah, I think I'd leave everything like that. We've got flight minutes there, so save that. And if we go into the CLI, if I just type in diff, that'll show all of the changes. So we are on Maytech F411 and Betaflight version 350, and we haven't got any resources remapped, which is good. So yeah, you shouldn't have a problem actually updating Betaflight, but you will have to probably set all of your settings different, because Betaflight 4 has come out and it's very different than 3.5. Let me just disconnect from that a second and reconnect and just check I've got everything. This is something that I have missed. So yeah, we do actually have a board and sensor alignment of 90 degrees on the yaw. That is so that you can get at the USB connector. So again, if you do end up flashing Betaflight, then you need to remember that, otherwise your orientation will be wrong. And also the motor direction is reversed, so it's running props out. Now, I know I said that I wasn't going to fly it on 2S, but I had the rare opportunity of the house being empty, so I gave it a go. This is a 300 milliamp 2S, And this is also with the gem fan props, so the 1635, and even indoors I was noticing a little bit of jello. We've got the sun beaming through the window, and yeah, a little bit of jello, but you could see I'm just about able to make tight gaps. But just look at the corner, tiny bit of jello I'm seeing there. And also, I mentioned earlier that the throttle value wasn't that important, but actually it tells us a lot in this video. Just check this out. So we are at 70% throttle for a hover, and I've mentioned before that these models are quite clumsy indoors, and that is because they have a higher latency than your usual FPV cam. So even though the throttle was actually not very responsive and didn't have much to do with how the model flew, it was still quite clumsy indoors because of that higher latency. And look at the throttle value there, 80% just to keep a hover, and we are just 1 minute 28 in. But what I will say is it did fly all around the house, and it wasn't intimidating at all. I was, mainly on almost 100% throttle to just get it hover. And look at this, 2.5 minute flight time, and we have to land. So I then took the model to the indoor sports hall. Now this is on that 3S battery, and this time I'm using the HQ props. And the sun wasn't out, but it was a very bright day, and I thought, well, earlier I was getting jello with the gem fan props, so let's take this outside here just for a little bit. And there wasn't any jello, so I do think with the HQ props that you won't get jello, or should I say as much jello than with the gem fans. There is a huge problem with these HQ props though, and that is the durability. This was the first flight that I had indoors, and the power is about the same. I think the gem fan props have just a little bit more power, but not much more. Anyways, this is really as much as you can do with it, I did actually do a couple of rolls, which maybe people won't like because you're not meant to do rolls with these things, but I don't know, I just find hitting these gaps just a little bit boring. But yeah, this first flight came to an end abruptly, even though I just sort of tapped the wall a little bit. One of these HQ props just instantly broke, and because they're black, then they also made a mark around the duct, so that's the propeller broken there. So from this point on, I was using the gem fans, so I went outside with the gem fans. Now, I'm not seeing any jello here, but it has gone considerably darker. It's around about 7:30, I think. But the wind was pretty calm, so I thought I would just play around outside the sports hall, because they let us go outside on the greens as the clocks have changed, so we've got the light. So I thought I'd do a bit of a range test. Now, I don't think this VTX is quite capable of doing 25 milliwatt in 25 milliwatt mode. I think it's probably producing about 13 milliwatt because it was just on the cusp there. But there you go, you see, it did a roll and it recovered from it at first. And look at the voltage there, so 11.3 volts. And it recovered fine. It was, again, only when the battery started to get towards the end of its life that it started doing some strange things, like here, I think. So that maneuver there, it did all on its own. So as it drops below 11 volts, then it's doing its yaw washout thing. So I didn't do too many of those, but I've noticed in a lot of videos out there that people just flew them like this, and I think it's important to show what does happen when you start throwing some actual acro at these things, because people may get misled, I don't know. I wanted to show that this really is for just hitting gaps and flying slow, and I think I hit this one, I can't remember, yeah, just about. But yeah, you'll see on the throttle as well with the 3S, I'm around about the 50% mark on the hover. So 3S is definitely where this thing is at in bigger spaces. But check it out, doing a little bit of gap hitting there. And I think there was a big helicopter flying at the same time as I was flying here, so I was trying to capture that. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is with this thing, I think. You get a long flight time, for sure. I think I got over a 5-minute flight time with this battery, so I guess you could say it's good for beginners. But when I was doing the acro with it, it didn't quite felt dialed in. It needs some work on the PIDs if you did want to do acro with it, and I'd probably keep the rates low as well because the footage is looking a little bit jerky, and I think that is to do with the rates. So this is what it's designed for, maybe just circling objects nice and slow, and then maybe reversing the footage or something like that. I'm also getting a lot of breakup on the DVR, you might have noticed. I'm not getting that really through the goggles. Something's going on with my TrueD diversity and the DVR and the fat shocks. I'm going to be switching to the Immersion RC Rapid Fire soon because that's not really a fair representation of what I was seeing. The video picture was pretty good with this model, no complaints, and there was just a little bit of electrical noise that came through to the FPV system, but it wasn't debilitating, and I've seen a lot worse. So again, the HD footage, impressed with that, and that is it really. Don't let the battery get this low because it will still fly, but if you check that out, 5 minutes 27. But yeah, on a 3S, that is going to damage your battery. So there you go, that is my review of the iFlight Cinebee. I'll link it in the below if you wish to get one, and if you can afford to do so, also link to my Patreon. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.